One of the struggles in Connecticut is we have 169 towns. We shouldn't have 169 different approaches to school security.
An accident or work injury can happen to anyone. Don't take on the insurance companies alone. I'm Jim Myron. Give me a call for a no-cost consultation.
And we started a dialogue in a more formal way, one that we've had as mayors and selectmen, and then I know that our departments have had, and our school districts have had for a long period of time, but probably with more interest and intensity more recently. And it's centered around school security and things that we can do. And it was prompted, unfortunately, by all too common incidents that we've seen around the country, and that even calls in surrounding towns where there have been alarm bells, if you will, and even incidents. And certainly we share commonalities of challenges to make our schools as safe as we possibly can for our students everywhere. So we shared best practices, and we agreed that in 1 hour or 2 hours of any day we weren't going to get to the point we needed to be, and we may never, in a variety of ways. But one thing we committed to doing with that smaller group was to continue a dialogue from town to town, continue to share best practices with an even stronger overlay of the interplay that we have, certainly between our law enforcement and our school districts and the relationships that we have with our first selectmen and mayors. We also have a state senator here, and he can touch on in a moment maybe some of the things that I think we probably, and I don't think I'm overstating it, collectively support that's going on a state level that will continue to make our state safer, Connecticut as a leader on common sense gun laws, and add to a level of one more piece in the puzzle to ensure that our schools, our cities and towns all over Connecticut, I'd like to think all over our country and the world, are as safe as they can be. Connecticut Against Gun Violence is here. Representatives of our federal delegation who have been so supportive and are, I think, at least incrementally, and I don't mean to minimize the effort that goes into this, but incrementally against some terrible opposition, I continue to make strides and gains on a federal level, understanding the recognition of the cost of lives that have been lost and those that could be lost without common sense gun laws on a federal level. So I applaud all of our federal delegation, but I know that Congressman Himes' office is here, Senator Murphy's office is here, and I think Senator Blumenthal's office has been very supportive as well. Mike, why don't I turn it over to you, because you were really good at capturing kind of what we did in the first part of the meeting and how we came together. And then we can go from there. All
right, well, thank you. I want to thank you, Joe, for hosting this here in the city of Bridgeport and taking a first step for us coming together. You know, for a lot of us, a big milestone was Sandy Hook. Not that school security started then, it started before that, but it's really been a focal point since then. And with the recent events in Parkland, as well as some local events that Joe mentioned here, we thought it good to come together and share best practices, learn from each other. And we realize that school security is not something that stops at the town boundary. That in fact, with mutual aid, we've been helping each other out as we get through these incidents. I'm also thrilled that with the state representation here with Senator Wong, with our federal delegation being represented, we're starting to realize that all three levels of government have to work together. One of the keys here is we know one of our big strategic issues in Connecticut is what I call the education gap. What we want to make sure is there's no security gap, that no matter where you go to school, in a suburban town or an urban area, that your kids are safe. And we want to make sure that we're working at all levels of government to make sure that happens, to make sure the funding is there, and to make sure the standard's there. One of the struggles in Connecticut is we have 169 towns. We shouldn't have 169 different approaches to school security. We're trying to come together, share best practices, and make sure our kids are safe and our communities are safe going forward. And Joe, again, thank you very much for doing that and getting us kicked off.
Thank you. A couple of things that came up in the meeting, and I'm glad that the state senator is here, about pending legislation that that you sponsored along a note with members of the Bridgeport delegation, which hopefully Connecticut's been a leader, as Jeremy's going to touch on. Senator, you could too, in common sense gun laws, but bump stock and ghost guns are laws up there, and I'm seeing will hopefully soon be law in Connecticut. Could you share, Senator, your advocacy?
Absolutely.
And appreciate you being here as well.
The Judiciary Committee will evaluate bump stock, which makes our guns to fire at an automatic repetition, and also ghost guns, which is a remarkable point that these guns are not registered, they don't need background checks. Those are loopholes we're trying to address. But I will share with you that in the Connecticut General Assembly, we have bipartisan support in recognizing that protecting our schools is paramount. And people need to remember that our last monumental gun bill not only addressed gun control, but it also created some significant funding sources to address the parity of mental health in our communities. And the third component of that was to allocate funds for school construction safety. So it is really a culmination with so many different people working together. And that's really, I think, the process, the solution is that we can't go into silos, that we have to collaborate, communicate, and work with each other, from cities to suburbs to rural area, to have a common standing to recognize that schools are a sanctuary. They're a place that we bring our children to learn and not to ever be fearful, and that parents who drop off their kids need to know that their kids are going to be back home safe. There is nothing more universal that I believe in our State General Assembly. But in saying that, a lot of work needs to be done in an education process, not only about guns, but the fact that in our communities, that if we see something, we have to say something. It's a complete educational process, and we had superintendents here to understand that the process goes from law enforcement to the community to education to the grassroots. Everywhere we go, we have to be vigilant to remember that every little piece of action can lead to a safer, better environment. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. For your fight up there, if we can do anything more to make sure we push it, we do.
Thank you.
Connecticut Gun Violence, Jeremy's been not only an advocate, a leader, but has made sure that we're well informed about the challenges and how to be supportive of them. Please.
So thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank you for your support, not only on this issue, but on all issues relating to gun violence prevention. And thank you to the chiefs of police who are here, and Senator Wong, who is also a strong supporter, who is one of the sponsors of the two House bills, that there is a public hearing tomorrow at 10 a.m., and that we're asking people to come, let your voices be heard in support of these bills. As you may be aware of by now, bump stocks was the device and devices that were used by the Las Vegas shooter. It was what he used to kill 58 people in as quick time as he possibly could. It is a weapon used to make a semi-automatic weapon into a virtual machine gun. It is not used for hunting. It is not used for target practice. It is used to hunt one thing and one thing alone. It is used to hunt people. It is used to increase the rate of fire, to make it easier to kill. And we cannot have these in the hands of civilians. We shouldn't have these in the hands of civilians. So we're asking for everyone's support in trying to ban these. They've already been banned in other states across the country, most recently in Florida. And then the second bill that we are looking to pass is to ban ghost guns. And ghost guns directly affects communities such as Bridgeport. It's basically a mail order kit where you can buy your own do-it-yourself kit to make a gun that has no registration, no serial number, and it's virtually untraceable where it gets its name from. The most troubling thing is that you can buy these kits to make your own gun without a background check at all. So we really need to make sure and do a better job at making sure guns stay out of the hands of people that should not have firearms. And that's something that's supported by everyone. We don't want guns to be in the hands of the wrong people. I think it's very important that we have a conversation that we had this morning. It just shows one smart step into being proactive about school security and not being reactive, not waiting till another disaster happens before we do anything. Connecticut has some of the strongest gun laws in the country. We have the 5th lowest gun death rate in the country as a result of that. And we need to continue leading the way in this country to pass common sense gun laws like we've been doing, and which are before the judiciary tomorrow. So thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you for having us.
For all your leadership and the bills, I guess, being heard tomorrow. And the police chiefs or superintendents, by the way, there are 4 towns that were here today. The first selectman of Trumbull had to leave, but Stratford, Bridgeport, and Fairfield. I don't know if the chiefs, any of the chiefs are in any order to collectively, or our assistant superintendents that are here would like to comment on from a chief or
Sure,
chief?
absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I am very encouraged because as well, the mayor and first selectman, Gary McNamara, chief of police in Fairfield, and superintendent, we are all very, very concerned with the climate in this country these days. But make no mistake, we make this our priority. Our children are precious to us, and we dedicate all our resources to their protection. I'm encouraged by what I heard here today. Bridgeport, I believe, in my humble opinion, we're ahead of the curve, but we can do better and we can do more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Chief, you want to add a couple words?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you all for gathering us all here. I think the real message that should go out is that we all up here understand that all of our parents and all of our children become very anxious, not only now, but anytime they hear any story of violence in our schools. And while we all may have different perspectives, law enforcement has one perspective, we live every day to try and protect our communities. Teachers and administrators, first selectmen and mayors have different perspectives on responsibilities. Collectively, we come here today, and I think what we all heard was we all have one goal, and that's to ensure, and I'm repeating it a little bit, to ensure that our children, when they leave school, their houses in the morning, that they come home the same way that they left. And ultimately, that is all of our goals up here. And I am as well encouraged to get everybody in the room and continue the dialogue that has been going on for a long time. But every one of our community members should understand that while this incident in Florida is a tragic reminder of all the work we have to do, this dialogue has started before today and before that incident, and will continue far beyond that to ensure that our children are all safe. So thank you for including
Chief,
us in that
thank you for being here
conversation.
too as
Thank you so
well.
much. Good job.
Comments, questions, ideas? Yes.
So what do you see changing as a result of this dialogue in schools in Bridgeport and Fairfield, Trumbull?
Well, I would just tell you from my perspective in the meeting, before we got to the legislative aspect of bump stock and ghost guns, which I support, and I think it's probably fair to say we'd all believe is a huge step in the right direction for Connecticut to still be a leader, and on a federal level to continue to support our strong advocacy on behalf of common sense gun laws on a federal level. We talked first about what we're doing, best practices, if you will, between districts. And we wanted to do it not with public consumption, because on the security level, this is, as departments know, police departments know better than all of us, we don't want to give away what we're doing particularly, because it will create an atmosphere for people to outsmart, let's say, the department or the schools. But in this instance, I could just share a couple things with you. We talked about physical, what's smart and what's not smart. And I'll just share my views. Guns in the hands of teachers is not smart. Okay, what Jeremy said, if he didn't say it here, we've said it together. More guns means more shootings and more deaths. We talked about ways in which we can make sure that our schools are as safe as they possibly can be, even from a physical perspective, on ingress, on how people get in, egress, how the level of securities may differ or not from one school to another, or have changed and hopefully been improved, and maybe even will continue to improve as a physical structure. Mike was able to share with us some of the perspective from his public hearing that he had in Fairfield. And Vicki as well in Trumbull, they had their public hearing, and Arresto was here, we're having ours tonight. And so the public input from those towns, I think, in my mind anyways, shared some light on what we can do. And then we realized there's a lot more we need to talk about. So we're going to have continuing forums, probably in town to town. I think Vicki ought for Trumbull up next, and maybe Fairfield after that, and then Stratford, between our superintendents or our school districts, our police departments, and our first selectmen, to continue that process. We talked about the things we're doing. We have cameras and we have all these different things. But what is it that we need? What is it that we can continue to learn from? And I'll just last this long answer. I think it's important. Jeremy didn't get to say it. He was in Parkland, I think it was a week after the shooting. And what prompted and got a light bulb went up for me that maybe we needed to think about, and one of the reasons we got together, he was at Parkland, and I'll short phrase it, walked into the same school 3 days after the students had been brought back in, wasn't stopped, wasn't questioned, and it left a question mark as to if that level of security still lacks there, and this is not a criticism there, it's just what was shared here. We better we may think we're doing everything great or good enough, and maybe we're not. And maybe we're missing something. So that was, I think, what brought us together, and I think we were right. Not right that we can always do more, but I learned from the meeting.
Linda, I can offer a different an additional perspective on this. Is in the meeting we talked about how Columbine literally woke us up to school violence, and in the years following, there was always, and Superintendent Robinson offered the perspective that she had always advocated beforehand to have more security at our schools. But there was that perception that there's a delicate balance. Do you want to fortify your schools, or do you want to create an environment of learning? And I think the sentiment has dramatically changed. With the rash of violence, I think people understand that there are necessary protocols, there are a necessary balance to ensure safety for every one of our child's teachers and administrators at schools. So one such example is the fact that we are now advocating, if you see something or hear something, say something. I will tell you, perhaps in the past, we just might have said, that might have been impolite. But I can assure you, what happened last month in Westport was a result of courageous young people stepping up and saying, something's not right. And I can happily say, what happened in Parkland, in which over 30 incidences of reports were ignored by law enforcement, I can say with 100% certainty, with our law enforcement officials back here, there will be no exception. They will check, they will validate, they will ensure that the public is protected. That's the confidence I have in our law enforcement. We would never let those things slip. So I think the message would be, to our broader community, to educators, to our general public and grassroots, that if you see something or you hear something or something's not right, let law enforcement know. Let school officials know. Because I'd rather be 900 times wrong than to have one case where we didn't say anything. So I think the change has been in the past where we might not have pointed out people that we thought might have been at risk, but now I can assure you, we're never going to take any chances. The safety of our kids are far too important.
But the general consensus among you all was that it was not a good idea to arm teachers?
I'm speaking for me. Anybody that wants to...
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you from what the mayor said, that's absolutely right. And when I was down in Parkland, I had an opportunity to speak to teachers, I had an opportunity to speak to politicians, community leaders. I was with the teachers union in Florida. And despite the fact that I was able to just waltz into the school and no one checked me, they were still looking to arm teachers, and that was their solution as to how they could make the schools more secure instead of just having a lock on the door or a gate or somebody checking IDs. So I can tell you this, from studies I've seen and from people I've spoken to in those situations, arming teachers is a recipe for disaster. If you add more guns to schools, you're going to have more gun deaths in schools.
Senator, what exactly is before the judiciary tomorrow?
We have a bill that will consider the banning of bump stocks, and then there is another bill, I think it's 5540 and 5542, that will address ghost guns. A better explanation was given by Jeremy, but it is one of the loopholes in which we have allowed nearly assembled guns to be purchased through mail order, purchased without any background checks, that could be very easily assembled and used. So these are nuances, and I will share with you, are we going to have people who may object to those kind of bans? Absolutely. But I can say with great confidence that in a bipartisan basis, the people and the legislators will support pushing those bills through, and I hope I will do my part.
Thank you.
And my plan is to testify, if I can be there physically, certainly with submitting comments and in support of both those bills. Anyone else? Yes.
So just had a quick question to clarify. So right now, there's a collaboration between 4 citizen towns?
Yes.
And is there an expectation that it will expand?
Well, you know, it's interesting. We talked about starting with us, and I think the answer is Mike is nodding yes. But we didn't want to, frankly, just for logistics, try and get 7, 8, 9, 10 mayors, police chiefs, superintendents in the room. Really, what we learned today was that's probably there's enough here for us to want to continue and maybe to add other cities and towns. I can't see a downside other than the logistics of scheduling and then getting everybody in the same room and trying to accomplish something. So yes. Thank you. You want to add something? Anyone? Okay. Go ahead, Senator. You look like you
Yeah, because I want to applaud our law enforcement, our municipal officials, and I think it's important for us to share with concerned communities, parents, teachers, that we are not taking any of this lightly. We are vigilant and constant to ensure that the schools are safe. I think it's important, because of all of your great efforts, to kind of reassure our community that we are on the case in this and that we have some of the best law enforcement in the country, and they are constantly, vigilantly making sure that our schools are safe. So I think it's an important message for us to convene and share with the broader community, because there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of emotion, and we can't deny that. But I can assure you, part of getting together and doing this is a way to reassure our community that we are keeping an eye on this and we're working very hard. Would that be fair?
I think it's great. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Chief? As always, thank you.